The first step into Le Monde felt like entering a realm of opulence, a world meticulously designed to dazzle and inspire awe. The entire space seemed to exude luxury, from the golden glow of its ornate chandeliers to the soft murmur of live jazz that barely touched the edges of hushed conversations. Though newly opened, Le Monde had already become the talk of the city, known for its refined French cuisine, exclusive clientele, and an air of understated power. As Lila adjusted the crisp collar of her uniform and walked across the gleaming marble floors, she focused intently on her duties. She had grown up mere blocks from this extravagant restaurant, but the world of Le Monde felt light years away from her humble upbringing. Over the past few weeks, she had seen celebrities, dignitaries, and even members of royalty pass through its grand doors. For most of the staff, working there was a thrill. For Leela, however, it was a complicated mix of pride and discomfort. Serving dishes that cost more than her monthly rent was a surreal experience, but she viewed the job as a stepping stone toward her true dream, opening her own cozy cafe one day. That evening, Le Monde was alive with energy. The city's elite had gathered to celebrate the birthday of a local billionaire's daughter. The air buzzed with excitement and speculation about the high-profile guests in attendance. Lila moved through the room with practiced ease, her eyes scanning her tables discreetly as she maintained her fluid rhythm of serving. Every night felt like an intricate dance, an unending routine of order-taking, wine-pouring, and the quiet, almost invisible grace of excellent service. Her focus was abruptly broken by a sharp, commanding voice cutting through the gentle hum of conversation. "Excuse me, waitress." Lila turned toward the sound and found herself facing a woman she had noticed earlier. The guest was striking, dressed in a shimmering silver gown that seemed tailor-made for the spotlight. Her hair was impeccably styled, and her neck and wrists sparkled with diamonds that could light up an entire room. She radiated a confidence that bordered on arrogance. A woman accustomed to commanding attention and expecting the world to cater to her whims. "Yes, ma'am. How may I assist you?" Lila asked, her voice polite and steady, despite the tension tightening her chest. The woman's eyes barely glanced at Leela as she waved dismissively toward her plate. "This steak is cold," she declared, her tone dripping with disdain. "Take it back. I didn't come here to eat something that's been sitting around. I have standards." Leela drew a deep breath, her expression unflinching. "I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience, ma'am. I'll ensure the kitchen prepares a fresh one immediately." The woman's lips curled into a smug smile, as though Leela's response was simply what she expected. "Good. And make it quick. I don't have all night." Lila nodded and headed to the kitchen, working hard to keep her emotions in check. Rude customers were a regular part of the job, but something about this woman's demeanor felt particularly cruel. It wasn't just her words. It was the cold contempt in her gaze, as if she viewed Lila as an inconvenience, a mere servant unworthy of respect. In the kitchen, the familiar clatter of pots and shouted orders provided a momentary reprieve. Lila relayed the complaint to Victor, the head chef, a gruff but kind-hearted man. "Another cold steak?" Victor grumbled, wiping his hands on a towel. "Patience really isn't on the menu tonight, is it?" Lila chuckled softly. "Nope, not much demand for it here." Victor shook his head, his expression softening. "Hang in there, kid. I'll have this fixed in no time." Returning to the dining room, Lila stole a glance at the woman's table. The guest was surrounded by an equally glamorous group of friends, their laughter ringing out like polished bells as they swapped stories about extravagant vacations and exclusive parties. The woman's laugh was loud and deliberate, yet Lila couldn't help but notice how hollow it sounded, more for effect than genuine joy. At the next table, however, a figure caught Lila's attention for a very different reason. An older man sat alone, dressed in a simple but impeccably tailored suit. His presence stood in stark contrast to the gaudy opulence around him. He carried himself with a quiet dignity, his gaze occasionally dropping to the worn leather journal in front of him, where he jotted down notes with careful deliberation. Despite his understated demeanor, there was an undeniable strength about him, an air of calm authority that seemed to command respect without a single word. Something about him felt oddly familiar to Lila, though she was certain she had never seen him before. She didn't have time to dwell on the thought. As she approached the woman's table with the freshly prepared steak, she steeled herself for another round of condescension, determined to meet it with unwavering professionalism. Finally, the woman snapped, her tone dripping with impatience. Her scrutinizing gaze darted to the plate Lila had just set before her. She inspected it as if it were a subpar artifact in an otherwise perfect gallery. Lila stood silently, hoping the ordeal was over. But it wasn't. "And bring me another glass of your finest wine," the woman demanded, elongating her words as if addressing someone incapable of understanding simple instructions. "And be quick about it." "Yes, ma'am," Lila replied, her voice steady and professional. As she turned to leave, she caught a hushed remark meant for the ears of the woman's entourage, but loud enough to reach her. "It's so hard to find decent help these days," the woman sneered, her voice filled with contempt. "Honestly, they'll let anyone work in these places now. Standards are slipping everywhere." The words sliced through Lila, and though she kept her expression neutral, they landed heavily. Her mother had always told her, "People's words can only hurt as much as you let them." But here, in this gilded room filled with reminders of all she had yet to achieve, the sting was undeniable. Lila moved to the wine counter, her steps measured and deliberate. A strange mixture of sadness and resolve bubbled within her. She didn't want this life forever, and she was doing everything in her power to make sure she wouldn't be stuck in it. She filled the glass with a deep crimson vintage, the wine catching the light in mesmerizing patterns, and carried it back to the table. Setting the glass down, she offered a polite nod, ready to turn away. But before she could, one of the woman's companions leaned forward with a smirk. "Oh, you must have gotten the wrong wine," he said, his voice loud enough for the table to hear. "That's vintage, isn't it? She probably wanted the budget version." The table erupted into laughter, the sound piercing through Lila like needles. Her cheeks flushed, but she turned away, concentrating on the rhythm of her steps as she retreated. She was no stranger to cruel jokes or dismissive comments. Hospitality often came with its share of indignities, but tonight felt different. The laughter lingered, echoing in her ears as an unwelcome reminder of the vast gulf between her world and theirs. Glancing over at the quiet man, Layla noticed he was watching her again. His gaze was calm, but there was something in his expression, something understanding, almost protective. It was only a fleeting moment before he returned to his journal, but the look gave Leela a flicker of comfort she hadn't expected. It was as though he saw something in her that even she struggled to recognize. By the end of the night, Lila was utterly drained. She moved through the final motions of clearing tables and stacking chairs, wiping away the remnants of a night filled with luxury for some, but laden with struggle for her. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was clear. No matter how difficult the days were, she would keep moving forward. This job was a stepping stone to her dreams, and she refused to let the sneers and insults of others derail her. As she locked up and walked home under the dim city lights, Lila found her thoughts drifting back to the older man. There had been something about his quiet presence, the way he observed without judgment, that felt significant. She couldn't know it then, but his presence that evening would set into motion events that would change everything. Lila arrived at Le Monde early, hoping to avoid the usual bustle of the staff competing for table assignments. She followed her ritual, finding a quiet corner to center herself and reminding herself why she worked so hard. She closed her eyes and imagined her dream. A small, welcoming cafe where people from every background could come to feel at home. It would be a place where community thrived, where warmth replaced judgment, and where anyone could afford to belong. By the time the first guests began arriving, Lila had steeled herself for another night of strained smiles and silent perseverance. She thought she was ready for whatever challenges awaited her. But she hadn't anticipated the return of the woman in the silver gown. Tonight, the woman wore a deep emerald dress that shimmered under the warm glow of the chandeliers. Lila recognized her immediately and took a steadying breath before approaching the table. "Good evening, ma'am." "Welcome back to Le Monde," Lila said, her voice calm and professional. The woman's eyes lit with recognition, followed by a slow, condescending smile. "It's you again. They've kept you on, I see. Brave decision." Leela felt a pang in her stomach but kept her composure. "Yes, ma'am? I'll be serving you tonight. May I start you off with something to drink?" The woman raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, as though Leela's mere presence was an affront. "I'll have the Chardonnay, and this time make sure it's properly chilled. I can't stand lukewarm wine." "Of course, ma'am," Lila replied, turning away even as she felt the woman's gaze boring into her back. The restaurant was filling quickly, but Lila couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. As she poured the wine at the bar, she glanced up and felt her breath catch. The older man from the previous night was there, now dressed in a sharp dark suit. His understated elegance made him stand out even more amidst the clamor of extravagance. "Good evening, sir," Lila said, a note of surprise in her voice. "It's nice to see you again." The man smiled warmly, a gesture that seemed to carry unspoken understanding. "It's good to see you too," he replied, his voice calm and rich, with a musical quality that lingered. "You have remarkable resilience, young lady." Lila felt her cheeks flush. Compliments were rare in her line of work, especially ones as genuine as this. "Thank you," she said softly, uncertain how to respond. "I just try to do my job as best as I can." The man nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "It shows. Keep going. You never know who's watching." Her lips curved into a small smile, the unexpected warmth of his words settling in her chest. As he returned to his table, she found herself holding on to that brief moment of kindness, a buoy in the storm of her evening. The woman in emerald, however, seemed determined to test Lila's patience. Every few minutes, she would beckon Lila with a wave of her hand or an imperious snap of her fingers, as if summoning a pet. Each request was delivered with a thinly veiled insult, a reminder of how insignificant the woman believed Lila to be. "More water," the woman demanded, her voice dripping with condescension. "And do try not to spill it this time." "Yes, ma'am," Lila replied, her tone even, though her frustrations simmered beneath the surface. As she poured the water, she focused on the steady sound of the liquid filling the glass, avoiding the woman's gaze. She knew what she'd see if she looked, the same smug sneer that had haunted her the night before. But tonight, Lila wasn't going to let the woman's disdain unravel her. When she finished pouring and stepped back, she felt a flicker of something new. Not defeat, but determination. Lila had a job to do, and she was going to do it with dignity, no matter how others treated her. Unbeknownst to her, the quiet observer was watching from across the room, his thoughtful gaze taking in more than just the scene before him. His steady eyes were fixed on the woman, radiating an intensity that needed no words. He didn't speak, but his presence alone carried a weight that was impossible to ignore. The woman, who had been so commanding, now looked visibly uneasy. She shrank slightly under his gaze, her haughty demeanor melting away like frost in the morning sun. She muttered something under her breath, her eyes darting down as if hoping to escape his silent judgment. But Lila could tell the man had seen everything. His expression wasn't just one of observation, it was one of assessment. It was as though he were weighing the woman's actions and finding them wanting. The woman turned back to Lila, her voice softer, almost apologetic. "That'll be all for now," she said, her tone subdued, her arrogance dulled. Lila nodded, retreating to the kitchen to catch her breath. She didn't know who the older man was, but there was something about him that seemed to command attention and respect without effort. His influence over the room went beyond mere wealth or status. He had a presence that made people reconsider their actions, as though his very gaze brought out the truth of who they were. As the night went on, Lila noticed a subtle but unmistakable change in the woman's behavior. Her demands became fewer, her sharp edges softened. She no longer snapped her fingers or barked commands. Instead, she spoke in a tone that was almost respectful. Even her laughter, which had previously rung out as a symbol of her dominance, became quieter, more restrained. When the older man finally stood to leave, he paused at Lila's station. He offered her a warm smile that carried a quiet strength. "Thank you for your service tonight," he said, his voice steady and kind. "I'm sure it's not easy to handle people like that." Lila returned his smile, feeling a wave of gratitude she hadn't expected. "It's all part of the job, sir," she replied, though his words meant more to her than she could express. The man nodded, his eyes twinkling with a warmth that made her feel truly seen. "Remember, he said, his voice dropping to an almost whisper. People often forget that those they overlook may have the greatest strength. Don't let anyone make you feel less than you are. And with that, he walked away, leaving Lila with a feeling of hope that lingered long after he was gone. She didn't know who he was or why he had chosen to speak to her, but his words felt like a gift, a quiet reminder that her worth wasn't tied to the opinions of others. As Lila finished her shift and walked home beneath the soft glow of the city lights, she reflected on the events of the evening. The world of Le Monde, with all its glamour and cruelty, felt a little less overwhelming. For the first time in a long time, she felt a strength within her that she hadn't fully recognized before, a resilience that the older man had seen and acknowledged. Little did Lila know, his influence would extend far beyond that night. The quiet power he carried would set in motion events that would challenge the very dynamics of everyone involved, including the woman in emerald. As Lila prepared for another shift at Le Monde, she couldn't shake the feeling that something unusual lay ahead. The older man's words echoed in her mind, each sentence anchoring a sense of self-worth she hadn't felt in years. Before leaving, she stood in front of her small mirror, straightened her uniform, and repeated his words aloud. Don't let anyone make you feel less than you are. When Lila arrived at the restaurant, she found it buzzing with an energy she couldn't quite place. The staff moved with a nervous urgency, whispers of an important guest spreading like wildfire. Lila overheard fragments of conversation among her colleagues, something about the elusive founder of Le Monde. Known for his low profile, the founder's reputation loomed large despite his rare public appearances. Tales of his sharp intellect, quiet philanthropy, and discerning eye were whispered among the staff, but few had ever seen him in person. Tonight, however, it seemed that was about to change. Despite his vast wealth and influence, few truly knew much about Mr. Emery Vale, the founder of Etoile, beyond whispered tales. A self-made man, he was rumored to have risen from modest beginnings to become one of the city's most respected restaurateurs. Stories about his sharp intellect, understated generosity, and unassuming nature circulated among the staff, though his public appearances were exceedingly rare. Tonight, however, he was said to be making an exception, and the mere possibility had thrown the entire restaurant into a frenzy. As Lila adjusted her apron and readied her station, she couldn't shake a growing sense of anticipation. She glanced around the dining room, half expecting to see the quiet, enigmatic man from previous evenings, but there was no sign of him. Just as she began to settle into the rhythm of her shift, the entrance doors opened, and her stomach dropped. The woman in emerald from the past 2 nights had returned, this time clad in an opulent dark blue gown. Her jewelry glittered in the low light, each piece chosen to command attention. The woman's gaze swept across the room, narrowing as her eyes landed on Lila. Her lips curled into a smug, knowing smile, a look that seemed to relish the opportunity to flaunt her status over Lila once again. Lila inhaled deeply, steadying herself. She reminded herself that this woman was a fleeting figure in her life, someone who would soon fade from memory. With her head held high, she approached the table. "Good evening, ma'am. Welcome back to Etoile," Lila said, her voice unwavering. The woman looked up, her expression unreadable, though her words were laced with mild disdain. "You again," she murmured, shaking her head. "I suppose this establishment really does have a high tolerance for mediocrity." Lila's stomach tightened, but she maintained her composure. "Is there anything I can start you off with this evening?" The woman waved a hand dismissively. "Just bring me the Chardonnay, and make sure it's chilled this time. Last night was a disaster." "Of course, ma'am," Lila replied, turning away to fulfill the order. She could feel the woman's gaze piercing her back, a silent reminder of the social chasm that separated them. Returning to the table with the wine, Lila blocked out the woman's condescending stare. She poured the wine with careful precision, setting the bottle down gently. But the woman let out a derisive scoff. "Do you have any idea what you're doing?" she sneered. "Honestly, it's painful to watch. People like you really shouldn't be allowed in places like this." The comment was calculated, meant to wound. But this time, Lila felt a quiet strength rise within her. She refused to let the woman's words define her. Taking a steadying breath, she responded calmly, "I'm sorry you feel that way, ma'am. I'm doing my best to serve you. The woman's eyes flickered with annoyance, as though Lila's poise was an affront she hadn't anticipated. Before the woman could reply, a sudden murmur rippled through the restaurant. Heads turned toward the entrance as a tall, distinguished man stepped inside. Lila's heart skipped a beat. It was him, the quiet man from the previous nights. But this time, he was not alone. Flanking him were two impeccably dressed assistants and several prominent figures from the local business scene, their eagerness to be seen with him palpable. The man carried himself with the same quiet authority that had silenced rooms before, but tonight, his presence was even more commanding. His eyes moved slowly across the restaurant, assessing each table as though measuring the worth of everything and everyone within. Lila watched, breathless, as he strode purposefully toward the center of the room. Around her, co-workers exchanged hushed whispers, their faces alight with astonishment. "That's him," someone whispered. "Mr. Vale," another murmured, "the founder of Etoile." The man who owned the very walls and floors they worked on now stood before them, his every movement exuding the weight of his reputation. Lila's heart raced as she tried to process the revelation. She had served him without knowing who he was, and yet his words from the previous nights echoed in her mind, grounding her in a moment that felt surreal. The distinguished man, Mr. Emery Vale, took his place at the reserved table near the heart of Etoile, a seat that symbolized his unparalleled status. As he settled into his chair, he glanced briefly in Lila's direction. His eyes carried a warmth of recognition that made her heart flutter. He had noticed her again. Meanwhile, the woman in the dark blue gown remained oblivious. She cast a fleeting, disinterested glance toward Mr. Vale, unaware of his true identity. Her focus quickly shifted back to Lila, her lips curling into a smug smile. "Isn't it amusing," she said, her voice intentionally loud enough to be overheard, "how some people think they can just waltz in here and pretend they belong?" Lila stiffened at the jab, but refused to react. She inclined her head slightly in acknowledgement and turned to leave, unwilling to give the woman the satisfaction of a response. But from the corner of her eye, she noticed something that made her pause. Mr. Vale was watching them. His expression was unreadable, but his gaze was sharp and unwavering, like an unseen force cutting through the noise of the room. A fellow waiter approached Lila and whispered, "Mr. Vale has requested that you serve his table tonight." Her eyes widened in surprise. She hadn't expected this. With a steadying breath, she nodded and made her way toward his table. "Good evening, sir," Lila said, her voice barely audible. Mr. Vale looked up, his gentle smile calming her nerves. "Good evening, Lila. I'm glad you're here." Hearing her name from his lips felt surreal, and it took her a moment to regain her composure. "It's an honor to serve you, sir. Is there anything you'd like to start with?" "I'll have the house special, please," he said with a slight nod. "And bring a bottle of your finest red wine. Tonight calls for a celebration." Lila returned moments later with the wine, pouring it with precision, her hands steady despite the intensity of the moment. She felt the woman's piercing gaze following her every move. Lila could sense the confusion in the woman's eyes, the subtle pieces of a puzzle beginning to fall into place. "Wait," the woman muttered, her voice low but audible. Her face paled as realization dawned. She looked between Lila and Mr. Vale, her shock unmistakable. You're the owner?" Vale turned to her, his expression tinged with mild amusement. "Yes, I am," he replied, his tone calm and composed, "and I must say, I couldn't help but notice how you've been speaking to my staff." The woman's confidence crumbled in an instant. She stammered, I didn't mean, I thought she was just." Mr. Vale's steady gaze silenced her. "She is a valued member of my team," he said firmly, "and as such, she deserves the same respect as anyone else in this room." The woman's cheeks flushed a deep red. She fumbled with her napkin, avoiding his eyes as her hands trembled. A heavy silence fell over the table, the weight of his words hanging in the air like an unspoken reprimand. Lila's heart raced as she observed the woman's visible discomfort. But more than anything, she felt an overwhelming sense of validation, a quiet affirmation of her worth. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly seen. Not as a server, but as a person of dignity and value. Mr. Vale turned back to Lila, his gaze softening. "Thank you for your service, Lila," he said. "It's people like you who make this place what it is." Lila nodded, her voice barely a whisper. Thank you, sir. As she walked away, she felt a newfound lightness, as if a burden had been lifted from her shoulders. The woman in the blue gown avoided her eyes for the remainder of the evening, her arrogance replaced by an unfamiliar humility. Lila carried on with her shift, her steps steadier, her resolve stronger. She was no longer just a waitress in her own eyes. She was someone with potential, someone with dreams worth fighting for. The days following Mr. Vale's visit were unlike anything Lila had ever experienced. Word of the interaction between him and the wealthy woman spread quickly among the staff, even reaching some of the restaurant's regular patrons. For Lila, the encounter was transformative. It was more than a moment of justice. It was the beginning of something far greater. She couldn't have imagined how deeply that single night would alter the course of her life. In the days following the pivotal night at Etoile, Lila noticed a quiet but undeniable shift in how she was treated. The mocking glances and whispered jabs from her colleagues faded away. Instead, she was met with nods of respect and subtle acknowledgments of her resilience and grace under pressure. Though the restaurant's atmosphere had softened toward her, Lila's mind remained fixed on Mr. Emery Vale and the words he had left her with. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon, just 2 days after the encounter, when Lila received a call from an unfamiliar number. She hesitated briefly before answering. "Hello, this is Lila," she said cautiously. "Is this Lila Moreno?" a calm, familiar voice asked. "Yes, speaking," she replied, her heart skipping as she recognized him. "This is Emery Vale. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Lila sat up straighter, swallowing her surprise. "Oh no, not at all, Mr. Vale. I'd like to meet with you if you're available," he continued. "There's something I'd like to discuss, something I believe could be mutually beneficial." Lila's thoughts raced, her curiosity piqued. "Of course, sir. I'd be honored." They arranged to meet at a small cafe far removed from the grandeur of Etoile. The venue was cozy and inviting, with rustic wooden tables, warm hues on the walls, and the comforting aroma of freshly baked bread. Lila arrived early, choosing a seat by the window where she could watch the city unfold. Her nerves fluttered as possibilities swirled in her mind. After a few minutes, she saw him approaching. Dressed in a tailored coat, Mr. Vale carried the same composed demeanor she had come to recognize, though in this setting he seemed more approachable. He offered a gentle smile as he took the seat across from her. "Thank you for meeting me, Lila," he said warmly. "I hope this setting is suitable. I find places like this far more comfortable than the upscale establishments people expect me to frequent." Lila smiled, feeling instantly at ease. "Not at all. I actually prefer spots like this myself." Mr. Vale nodded approvingly, glancing around the room. "You have good taste," he remarked. After a brief pause, his tone turned thoughtful. "I wanted to speak with you because you left a strong impression on me the other night. Watching how you handled yourself in difficult circumstances, I couldn't help but notice qualities that are rare to find." Lila felt her cheeks flush. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot coming from you." "Please, call me Emery," he said, leaning forward slightly. "I don't believe in formalities, especially with people I think have a great future ahead of them." She nodded, her nerves dissolving with each passing moment. "Emery," she repeated, testing the name with a small smile. "I'm curious, what is it you wanted to discuss?" He reached into his coat pocket and retrieved a small notebook, placing it gently on the table. His expression was serious but inviting. "I've been in the restaurant business for many years," he began. "In that time I've watched countless people come and go, but I rarely see the kind of quiet strength and determination you demonstrated. That night, it stood out to me." Lila listened intently as he continued, her heart quickening. "I've been working on a new project," Emery said. "Something that's very different from Etoile, more grounded, more accessible. A place that celebrates community, diversity, and resilience. And I want you to be a part of it." Lila's eyes widened, her emotions a mix of disbelief and excitement. "You want me to help open a restaurant?" Emery nodded, his gaze steady and sincere. "Yes. I'm looking for someone with vision, someone who understands the value of hard work and what it means to hold on to a dream. From what I've seen, you're exactly the person I need." Her mind reeled. She had always dreamed of opening her own cafe, but it had felt like a distant goal, something she might achieve years down the line, if at all. The idea that Emery Vale, one of the city's most respected restaurateurs, was offering her an opportunity to make that dream a reality seemed almost too good to be true. "What do you think?" he asked, his voice gentle but encouraging. "I think," Lila began, her voice trembling slightly. "I think this is a chance I never imagined I'd have." Emery smiled. "Good, because I believe in investing in people who show promise, Lila, and you have more promise than you realize." For the first time in a long while, Lila felt the weight of her struggles begin to lift, replaced by the spark of a possibility she couldn't ignore. "Yes," Emery said, his voice steady. "I'm looking for someone with vision, someone who understands what it means to work hard and hold on to a dream. From what I've seen, you're exactly that kind of person." Lila hesitated, her thoughts racing. "I've never managed anything before. I'm just a server." Emery raised his hand gently, interrupting her. "You're not just anything, Lila. I've seen how you carry yourself, how you hold on to your dignity in the face of disrespect. That kind of strength is rare, and it's exactly what I want to build this new restaurant around." Lila took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I've always dreamed of opening a small cafe someday," she admitted. "But I never thought it would be possible. I don't have the money, and I definitely don't have the experience." "That's where I come in," Emery replied, leaning back with a calm confidence. "I'll provide the funding and guide you through the process. You'll learn everything: management, customer service, finances, marketing, and you'll have a stake in the business, Lila. This will be as much yours as it is mine." Lila was speechless. She could hardly believe that someone like Emery Vale, a figure she had once admired from afar, now saw potential in her. The weight of the opportunity he was offering felt almost overwhelming. Emery leaned forward, his tone gentle but firm. "Take some time to think about it. This isn't a decision to make lightly. But remember this: dreams don't come to us fully formed. They start small and they grow as we nurture them. This is your chance to begin." Excitement, doubt, and gratitude swirled in Lila's mind as she met Emery's steady gaze. His quiet conviction gave her courage. "Thank you, Emery," she said softly. "I don't know if I deserve this, but I promise I won't let you down." "I know you won't," Emery replied, his expression softening with pride. For the next few hours they sat together discussing ideas. Each possibility sparked new inspiration. They envisioned the restaurant as a warm, inviting space where people from all walks of life could gather. The menu would celebrate diverse flavors, blending comfort and innovation. Emery encouraged Lila to share her thoughts, listening intently as she described her love for homemade recipes and her dream of creating a space that felt like home. As they prepared to leave, Emery handed her the small notebook he had been carrying. "Consider this a place to start gathering your ideas," he said. "Write down anything that comes to mind. No idea is too small or too ambitious at this stage." Lila accepted the notebook with a reverence she couldn't quite describe. The leather cover was soft under her fingers, and she traced its surface, feeling the weight of possibility it represented. In the days that followed, Lila dove headfirst into planning. She filled the notebook with sketches, notes, and menu concepts, letting her imagination take shape on the pages. Her ideas ranged from the color of the walls to the ambiance of the space and the way each dish would tell a story. Emery's guidance was patient and supportive. He offered valuable insights, but always allowed her the freedom to explore her vision. Each day brought new challenges, but with each one, Lila's confidence grew. One evening, after another long day of planning, Lila paused to reflect. She thought back to that first night at Etoile, to the humiliation she had endured. What had once been a painful memory now felt like a catalyst, something that had propelled her toward this unexpected path. She remembered Emery's words: "Dreams don't come to us fully formed." As she closed the notebook for the night, Lila felt a deep sense of purpose and fulfillment she had never known before. The restaurant was no longer a distant hope. It was becoming real, and she was at the center of it, shaping it with her hands and her heart. As the weeks passed, Lila found herself completely immersed in the whirlwind of planning, problem-solving, and learning. Each day brought a new task that pushed her beyond her comfort zone. Emery remained a steady guide, introducing her to his network of chefs, designers, and contractors. He explained every role with patience, helping her understand the complexities of building a business from the ground up. One afternoon, while sifting through fabric samples for chairs and curtains, a wave of disbelief washed over her. She was no longer just a server at Etoile, she was designing her own space. The restaurant was slowly becoming tangible, and with every step, her confidence grew. They had chosen a charming location on the edge of downtown, nestled between quaint shops and art galleries. The area exuded a perfect balance of urban energy and cozy familiarity, a place that felt connected to the community. The moment Lila saw it, she knew it was right. She could already imagine the scent of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries wafting onto the street, inviting people in. But the space was far from ready. The walls were cracked, the paint faded and peeling, and the floorboards creaked with every step. Seeing the doubt flicker in Lila's eyes, Emery placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's like a blank canvas," he said with a smile, "and you get to decide how to bring it to life." Encouraged by his words, Lila threw herself into the work. She studied the intricacies of budgeting and learned the nitty-gritty of construction. Her days were filled with meetings with contractors, selecting furniture, and researching everything from sustainable food suppliers to interior design trends. In the evenings, Lila returned to Etoile to finish her shifts as a server. It was a grounding reminder of how far she had come and why she was working so hard. Every decision she made for the new restaurant felt deeply personal. The wall colors, the layout, even the design of the menus became reflections of her vision. But the menu itself was her true passion. Given full creative control, Lila poured her heart into crafting dishes inspired by her mother's cooking and her own culinary experiments. She created a blend of traditional and modern, celebrating flavors that honored her roots while appealing to a diverse audience. Emery's advice throughout the process was invaluable. He joined her many mornings to review blueprints or brainstorm menu concepts, but he never overstepped. "This is your dream," he reminded her often. "I'm just here to help you see it through. A place that feels like home." One evening, as they finalized the menu, Emery looked at Lila with a proud smile. "You know, Lila, this place is going to change lives. I can already see it." Lila laughed softly, though his words weighed on her in the best way. "I hope so," she replied. "I want this to be a place where people feel welcome, somewhere they can escape, even if just for a cup of coffee or a warm meal." "That's exactly what makes this project different," Emery said, his tone thoughtful. "You're not just creating a business, you're building a sanctuary. People need places like this." The day of the soft opening finally arrived. Lila stood outside, staring at the elegant sign above the door, Haven. The name felt perfect, a tribute to everything she hoped the restaurant would represent: a refuge, a place of connection, and a reminder that even the simplest dreams could grow into something extraordinary. The name Haven was her choice, a tribute to the foundation that had carried Lila through difficult times. It symbolized the strength of her family's resilience and her own journey of growth. Inside, the restaurant had been utterly transformed. What was once a drab, lifeless space was now warm and inviting. The walls were painted in earthy tones, adorned with handmade wooden shelves holding lush plants and local artwork. A long counter stretched along one wall, showcasing freshly baked pastries, each one carefully crafted by Lila herself. The atmosphere was exactly what she had envisioned: comfortable yet elegant, polished yet welcoming. As guests began to arrive, Lila's nerves buzzed with a mix of excitement and anticipation. Friends, family, and curious newcomers filled the tables, their faces alight with curiosity and delight. Among them was her mother, sitting at a table near the front. The pride in her mother's eyes was unmistakable, evident in every smile and nod. Lila couldn't believe this was real. Her mother was here, in her restaurant, witnessing her dream come to life. In a quiet corner, Emery observed the scene, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. He offered Lila an encouraging smile as she moved from table to table, greeting guests and explaining the menu with a confidence that surprised even herself. The night felt like a dream, one she hoped would never end. As the evening unfolded, Lila spotted a familiar face among the crowd, the woman from Etoile who had humiliated her. She was seated alone at a corner table, scanning the menu with an air of mild curiosity, seemingly unaware of Lila's presence. Lila's initial shock gave way to calm. She had worked so hard to reach this moment, and the woman's presence couldn't diminish it. Composing herself, Lila approached the table with the same grace and professionalism she extended to every guest. "Good evening," she said, her voice steady. "Welcome to Haven. I'm Lila, the owner." The woman looked up, her eyes widening as recognition dawned. Her mouth opened slightly in shock, and for a moment her haughty demeanor faltered. "You're," she stammered, her face flushing as she struggled to find the words. "You're the owner?" Lila nodded politely, keeping her expression neutral. "Yes, I am. Is there anything I can recommend for you tonight?" The woman's gaze flicked between Lila and the menu, discomfort clear in her posture. After a pause, she nodded. I'll take your recommendation." Lila smiled, sensing the unease in the woman's shoulders. "I'd suggest the lamb stew. It's a family recipe, something close to my heart." The woman nodded again, avoiding Lila's gaze. As Lila walked away to place the order, she felt an unexpected sense of closure. The encounter wasn't about revenge or superiority. It was about transforming a moment of past humiliation into one of quiet dignity. Throughout the evening, Lila kept an eye on the woman's table, watching her expressions shift as she tasted the dishes. A look of surprise crossed her face and perhaps even admiration. The woman left quietly, without saying a word, but Lila felt an undeniable peace. She had extended her respect without compromising her own integrity. As the night drew to a close, Emery approached her, raising a glass in a quiet toast. "Congratulations, Lila," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "This is just the beginning." Lila clinked her glass with his, feeling a surge of gratitude for everything he had done. "Thank you, Emery. None of this would have been possible without you." Emery shook his head, smiling. "No, Lila, this was always within you. I just helped you see it." In the days that followed, Haven continued to draw attention. Word spread quickly about the restaurant, which offered not only exceptional food but also a welcoming atmosphere that felt like home. People from all walks of life passed through its doors, each finding a piece of themselves in the warmth of the space Lila had created. She began to recognize familiar faces as regulars returned, drawn not just by the menu, but by the sense of belonging the restaurant fostered. Each smile, each satisfied guest, reinforced the knowledge that Lila had built something extraordinary, a haven for everyone who walked through the doors. One evening, after a long and bustling day, she locked up Haven and paused to take it all in. The tables were neatly arranged, the lights softly dimmed, and the lingering aroma of coffee filled the quiet space. This was her place, her sanctuary. What had once been a distant dream was now her reality. She knew challenges still lay ahead, but for the first time she felt ready to face them. In the silence, she could almost hear her mother's voice, reminding her of her worth, of the quiet wisdom that had guided her through so many struggles. Haven wasn't just a restaurant. It was a testament to resilience, a celebration of transforming pain into purpose. As Lila left for the night, she felt a profound gratitude, not only for Emery, who had guided her, but also for the journey that had brought her here. She had found her place and her purpose, and in doing so she had created a space for others to find theirs as well. Months passed, and Haven quickly became a cornerstone of the community. The restaurant attracted a diverse crowd, locals who had watched the building's transformation with curiosity, young professionals drawn by its reputation, and even tourists who had heard about its welcoming atmosphere. But for Lila, Haven was more than just a business. It was a home and a bridge to her roots, a piece of herself she shared with everyone who stepped through its doors. Emery's role in her life shifted during this time. While he remained her mentor, helping her navigate the challenges of running a business, he also became a close friend. Their morning meetings, once focused on logistics and operations, evolved into deeper conversations about life, dreams, and the impact they wanted Haven to have on the world. "You're building something meaningful here, Lila," Emery often reminded her over coffee. "Not just for yourself, but for everyone who needs a place to feel seen and valued." Lila took those words to heart. She began adding personal touches to make Haven a true community space. She started a pay-it-forward initiative, allowing customers to purchase meals for those in need. She collaborated with local artists, displaying their work on Haven's walls. She even began hosting intimate gatherings where people could share stories, music, and dreams. Haven evolved from a restaurant into a hub of connection, a place where people came not just to eat, but to belong. One morning, as Lila was cleaning up, Emery arrived with an envelope in hand, his eyes twinkling with excitement. "Open it," he urged. Inside was a formal letter inviting her to speak at a local business conference. The event, attended by prominent entrepreneurs, aimed to highlight stories of resilience and success. Lila stared at the letter, wide-eyed. "They want me to speak?" she asked, her voice a mix of disbelief and nervousness. "Of course they do," Emery replied with a chuckle. "Your story is exactly what people need to hear. You've shown that dreams can be achieved with hard work, kindness, and a sense of purpose. It's time the world saw that." The invitation marked a new chapter for Lila. Over the following days, she poured herself into preparing her speech, practicing in the quiet hours after Haven had closed for the night. Her words echoed softly in the empty dining room, the space that had become a living representation of her journey. When the day of the conference arrived, Lila stood backstage, her heart racing. Yet, as she stepped onto the stage and faced the audience, a calm determination steadied her. Her story, the challenges she had faced, the resilience she had built, and the community she had created, was no longer just her own. It was a message of hope for anyone who had ever doubted themselves. Lila spoke from the heart. She shared the story of her journey, the challenges she had faced, the moments of doubt, and the strength she discovered within herself. She told the audience about Haven, a place born from resilience, built for community, and rooted in love. As she looked out at the faces before her, Lila realized she had come full circle. From a young woman struggling to find her worth, she had grown into a leader helping others discover their own. When she finished speaking, the applause was thunderous. People approached her afterward, inspired by her story and eager to learn more about Haven and the vision behind it. For the first time, Lila felt like more than just a business owner. She was a voice for her community, someone whose journey was worth sharing. In the months that followed, Haven continued to flourish, both in reputation and impact. Lila expanded the Pay It Forward program, offering meals to those in need without question. She began hosting free cooking classes for young people, sharing her passion for food and passing on the lessons she had learned. Each week, she held community nights, inviting patrons to share stories, songs, and ideas. These gatherings created a rich tapestry of voices and experiences, breathing life into the restaurant. One evening, as Lila moved between tables, she noticed a young woman sitting alone, her posture hesitant, her gaze uncertain. The sight reminded Lila of herself years ago, before she had found her strength and purpose. Approaching with a warm smile, Lila said, "Welcome to Haven. I'm Lila. Is this your first time here?" The young woman nodded, looking up with a shy smile. "I've heard a lot about this place. I didn't expect it to feel so welcoming." Lila pulled up a chair, her heart swelling with pride. "That's exactly what we aim for. This is a place for everyone, no matter who you are or where you're from." The woman's eyes lit up. "I've always dreamed of opening a small bakery," she confessed, "but it feels impossible, like it's just a dream." Lila leaned closer, her voice gentle but firm. "Dreams always start small. I was a server at a restaurant not far from here, just like you. It took years, but I never gave up, and now I'm here, sharing my journey with people like you." The woman's expression softened, her doubt giving way to hope. "Do you really think it's possible?" Lila nodded, her smile unwavering. "Absolutely. It takes hard work, resilience, and faith in yourself. And when the road gets tough, remember, you're not alone. People like me, who've walked that road, are here for you." As the young woman left, her steps filled with newfound confidence, Lila felt a deep sense of purpose. Haven had become more than a restaurant. It was a beacon for those who needed a reminder that dreams were within reach. It was a place where everyone's story mattered, a testament to the power of kindness and perseverance. One evening, Emery visited, taking his usual seat by the window. As Lila brought him a coffee, he looked around, his eyes shining with pride. "You've created something extraordinary, Lila," he said warmly. "I knew you had it in you, but I never imagined it would grow into this." Lila glanced around at the laughter, the conversations, and the connections forming all around her. It was you who believed in me, Emery. Without you, none of this would have happened. He shook his head, smiling. I may have seen the potential, but it was you who did the work. Haven is your legacy, Lila, and it's only just beginning. As Emery left, Lila watched him walk away, overwhelmed with gratitude for his faith in her. Haven had become more than a dream. It was a community, a family, a home for anyone seeking connection and belonging. The years passed, and Haven's influence only grew. The restaurant inspired similar spaces across the city, each carrying a piece of Lila's vision. She remained deeply rooted in the original Haven, her spirit woven into every dish, every conversation, and every story that unfolded within its walls. Lila knew she had found her purpose and her place in the world. Haven wasn't just a restaurant. It was a testament to her journey, a symbol of resilience and hope for anyone who dared to dream. And as long as there were people seeking connection, searching for more, and longing for a place to belong, Haven would stand, a legacy of love, kindness, and the quiet strength that had made Lila's dream a reality.